Thanks all of you for coming today to hear me talk about my work. I actually had a nightmare about today, this talk, last summer. And I wasn't really worried about the content or the form, how I would say it, because as you know, once I get started, there's really no controlling what comes out of my mouth. But I woke up in this panic and I thought, don't wear horizontal stripes because you'll look really wide on camera. I've since seen this research that proves otherwise, where they say it elongates you. So I'm going to do a test today. So we'll see how it looks on camera. You may think this is a strange way to start my talk. However, it's just an example of the storytelling function of textiles. Textiles are conveyors of meaning. For example, what we wear tells a lot about us. It can tell about your religious affiliation. If you like a particular sports team, if you want to disassociate yourself from a particular group of people. So this whole idea of textiles, of conveyors of meaning, telling stories also ties in with this whole idea. Let me start over again. This idea of textiles as conveyors of meaning is really quite natural. Textiles being, let me start over again, one more time, okay? It's hard here doing this in front of the camera. I really put in the spot. This whole idea of textiles as telling stories and conveying meaning is really quite natural because the word textile and the word text, which is related to storytelling, both come from the same root. And you can think of these textile and storytelling metaphors in English. For example, spin me a yarn, which means to tell a story, cut from the same cloth, and other examples like World Wide Web. And in my work, I try to exploit these storytelling functions of textiles to explore themes such as masculinity, gender roles, and sexuality. And perhaps the culmination of this work is in my most two recent samplers, 6 and 7, in which, as one of my committee members says, I'm now beginning to speak in complete sentences rather than in isolated utterances. So I'm actually not going to speak too much about my work today because last year I was presenting my work to a faculty member and he said, Bren, your personal history is very interesting. I didn't ask him if he thought my personal history was more interesting than my work because I've learned not to ask questions I don't want to know the answers to. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my own personal history. I was born in the 1960s and spent most of my childhood in the 70s when this craft renaissance was going on. So I did all sorts of crafts of the 70s, like sand art, decoupage. Those older people of you, what other ones were going on in the 70s? Macrame, hooked rugs. Interestingly enough, I really didn't do too many textiles, but there was this textile tradition in my family. My grandmother, she crocheted Afghans. My mother's a quilter. My sister, she now makes costumes for local theater productions. My brother's a puppeteer. He actually makes his own puppets and costumes for his puppets. I have two other siblings. One brother, he's a singer and he also does woodworking. And the other one, she's a graphic designer, but she also does crafty things around the house. So I come from this tradition where it was really encouraged. However, as a little boy, I quickly learned that certain crafty things I shouldn't be too open about. I think boys are given this pressure to conform to a certain mold from early on, so I quickly went into the closet about that. And speaking of the closet, in terms of my own emerging sexuality, as a youth, I gave this example in yesterday's art history class at which I spoke. It was 1972, and Mark Spitz had won 7 gold medals in the Munich Olympics. And I remember I used to go up to my mother's sewing room and sneak peeks at this picture of Mark Spitz wearing a Speedo with his 7 gold medals. And I knew, even at age 8, no one had explicitly told me, but I knew that I couldn't tell anyone that I like to look at those pictures. So I kind of went into the closet about that. Another, I think, important influence for me was that my mother and I spent many hours playing Scrabble. And that instilled in me a love of language, which intersects with my current art practice and also ties in with this whole storytelling aspect of textiles. So I pursued a relatively normal life, went to college, had a few jobs, and then in 1996 I was living in Los Angeles. I wanted to take a pottery class at the Barnsdall Arts Center, but the pottery class was full. I said, well, what the hell? I'll take weaving, that's open. Can I say hell in this talk? I said worse words than yesterday's talk, but anyway. So I signed up for weaving, and it was just this natural connection to my love of language and my family's history. And it's been a wonderful, this use of textiles has been a wonderful way for me to explore these themes I mentioned before, and also as a way to kind of keep in check my OCD tendencies.